MacDonald, I'm a native of the Isle. Was born among old Evans bogs when I was but a child. My father fought in
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. As you see, I have an escort. I'm Cheryl Raymond, Manager of Public Programs and Special Events here at the Library for the Performing Arts. And we have a lot happening here in the next couple of months. As you know, we have a wonderful exhibition called Ireland, America, The Ties That Bind, which is on display in the Owens Library Gallery on the plaza level of the library. We're very pleased to have David Kincaid with us today. David is a vocalist, a songwriter, a producer, and has performed extensively throughout the United States and in Europe as well. Now, if you would please help me give a warm welcome to David Kincaid.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to our concert today here at the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts. This is a very special thing for me, actually. I'd like to say that when I began the search for this material, and all these songs you'll hear today are authentic to the Civil War period. That search began right here at this library. And this was back in the mid-90s, and I came to this library just armed with a couple of titles, and a very obliging librarian put them into the computer because no one had internet back then, and told me where some of these titles were. Some were here, some were in other universities, but when I started this search for these songs, I was told by people who supposedly knew what they were talking about that songs of the Irish in the Civil War, you'll never find those. Well, I have hundreds of them now. They were published pretty much on a weekly basis, very topical songs. Now that doesn't happen so much these days, but they were published almost like the news. It would be a broadside. Now, broadside was just a lyric sheet, lyrics only, or what was called a songster book. Now, a songster was a compilation of all the lyrics that would be published in broadside. So that's what you'll be hearing today. And what they would do is put these new lyrics to old Irish melodies. So you'll recognize a lot of the melodies. The Irish love to recycle melodies. They've been doing that for centuries. So that was the case back then and still goes on today. Now, some of those melodies are 1,000 years old or more. So anyway, I do this presentation around the country and a lot of Irish festivals, and people come up to me and they say, what are you doing here? What do the Irish have to do with the Civil War? Well, there were upwards of 200,000 that fought in the Civil War. 160 or so thousand were on the Yankee side, maybe even more. And on the Confederate side, 25 to 50 to 80,000, depending on who you ask. So if you're from the South, you know, I hate to tell you this, Southern people always hate it when I tell them there were way more Irish Yankees, but it's just the way it was. It's not about preference, even though I'm up here in the Yankee uniform. It's about population concentration. But don't despair, we'll have just a handful of Confederate tunes for you as well, Confederate Irish tunes. Now, one thing I'd like to explain to you is when the Irish went in to fight, they had two wars to win. And that was, in the case of the Yankee Irish, to win the war for the Union, to preserve the Union, and also to win acceptance. They were not treated well when they came here. No Irish need apply. Those placards were all over New York City and cities all across the north, especially the northeast. So they experienced galling prejudice, especially Irish Catholics. So they went out to prove themselves, just like the colored troops, the USCTs as they were called, the African American troops. They and the Irish were the ones who were treated the worst, and consequently fought the hardest. Anyone who fought against the Irish or alongside the Irish, or alongside the African Americans or against them, they immediately developed a profound respect for their courage under fire and their discipline. Now, I'm not here to tell you that the Irish are better than anyone else. It's just you tell any group of people that you're not as good, and they will do what they can to prove you wrong. Now, one of the ways the Irish made sure that they were going to be recognized for their sacrifice and their courage was to go into battle with the Irish flag. Now, at this point, I'll point out that regiments in the Civil War, especially on the northern side, were authorized to carry 2 flags. Regiments would go in 2 ranks, and in the center of the regiment, there would be 10 companies to an infantry regiment. In the center would be placed the color company, the color guard. And these lads that are with me here today represent Company A of the 69th New York, which was the premier Irish regiment before, the militia before the war, and the New York State Volunteers when the Irish Brigade was formed. And they're here to help us out today. Now, I'll just show you that right now. Color guard. Attention. Shoulder up. Now the flags that were carried were 6 feet on the staff by 6.5. These are the national colors. Color Sergeant O'Neill, if you would show them. Pretty much like you would see today, except there were 34 stars at the beginning instead of the 50 that we have. And on it is written 1st Regiment Irish Brigade. That was their Irish Brigade designation. Their state volunteer designation was the 69th New York. I know that gets confusing. Okay, thank you, Steve. Now this side, now before I present this one, the regulation regimental color was a blue flag with an eagle, and it had red banners with a unit's designation. But because they were state volunteers, they were cut some slack. So the Irish regiments went in with this flag, if you can see it. The green flag of Erin with the golden harp of Brian Boru on there. Brian Boru was the Irish High King who defeated the Danes in 1014. And that is your classic Irish symbolism. And below it you have the shamrock wreath, which is the symbol of Irish Christianity and the connection to St. Patrick. And above it you have can you hold that flag out a little bit more? There we go. You can see the sunburst coming through the clouds, and that was the Fenian symbols. Now the Fenians were the American branch of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, who are of course dedicated to the liberation of Ireland at any cost, even at the point of armed rebellion, of course. Okay, thanks very much. You can post the colors. Now the next tune deals with the theme of intervention in the Civil War by the foreign powers, especially the British and the French. As I mentioned, there was a group called the Fenians, the Fenian Brotherhood, the American branch of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Now, there were chapters all over the country, and especially up here in the north. And at one point, about November 1861, a British mail vessel called the Trent was on its way back to England. And it was stopped and boarded by a U.S. Navy ship, the San Jacinto, and its captain had the 2 Confederate diplomats who were aboard the ship. They were en route to England to try and garner support from the British crown on the side of the South. So they captured these diplomats and brought them back. Well, this was a huge international incident. The British were threatening really to get into the war at that point on the side of the South. Now the Irish, of course, when they caught wind of the fact that the British might be fighting for the South, entire chapters of the Fenians just evaporated as they enlisted in the Union Army. Probably no other event during the war prompted them to enlist than that. So this deals with that. It's called the Opinions of Paddy Magee. Now there are several references in the song. One, Colombia in these songs is mentioned a lot, Colombia. They don't mean the South American country where we get coffee and other stuff. They mean America. And in political cartoons of the 1860s, Colombia was represented as a woman in a toga with the laurel wreath, just like the Statue of Liberty. And we have to remember this part of the world was almost called Colombia after Christopher Columbus. So it was often used as a synonym for the U.S. or America, because the Confederates used it as well. They also mention in the song John Bull, and if you don't know, John Bull is, of course, Great Britain, the British crown. So that comes up a lot. Other words that come up in these songs are sort of slang terms like bigora, bedad, bigar. Now that's not Irish Gaelic. These were just a way to avoid getting in trouble with your parish priest. Instead of saying by God, you'd say bigora or bedad. And instead of by Jesus, you would say bejabbers. So when those come up, you know what they mean. Well, the Opinions of Paddy Magee.
I'm Paddy Magee, sir, from Ballinahee, sir, in an illigant ship like up over the sea. Father Donald sent me my passage, he lent me sure only for that I'd walk all the way. He talked of America's freedom and glory, but Dora says that's the country for me. So to end a long story, I've come now before you to give the opinions of Paddy Magee. When Ireland was needing and famine was feeding and thousands were dying for something to eat, 'twas America's doctors that sent for the waters the ships that were loaded with corn and wheat. And Irishmen sure will forever remember the vessels that carried the flag of the free, and the land that befriended they'll die to defend it, and that's the opinions of Paddy Magee. When I'm sure on our boulder, the musket to shoulder, enlisting to learn the soldier and trade. With poker and fighting and our delighting, they swell up the ranks of the Irish Brigade. With Columbia defying the whole British line, the sons of old Ireland forever shall be. I have no intervention if that's their intention. Now that's the opinions of Paddy Magee. John Bull, you devil, you better keep civil. Remember the story of 76, when Washington gloriously slaughtered the Tories. Away from Columbia you'd have cut your sticks. And it comes again, you're inclined to be mad. There's a city that's called New Orleans, do you see? Where Hickory Jackson, he drove off the Saxon. Now that's the opinions of Paddy Magee. Although now we're in trouble, it's only a bubble. We'll soon make the foes of the Union retire. Foreign knaves that would meddle had better skedaddle, for them Uncle Sam has a taste of Greek fire. They'll find if they try, Columbia's a giant, and victory perched on the flag of the free. For the American nation can wait all creation. Now that's the opinions of Paddy Magee. Now that's the opinions of Paddy Magee.
Folks, thank you very much. The opinions of Paddy Magee.